All right, nerds, we're going to talk about delirium. We care about delirium for two reasons. One, it kills patients. And the second, it changes our freaking management. If somebody is hyperactive, pulling out all their lines, you may think they're agitated, but if they're delirious, giving them a benzo to calm them down, or a Benadryl, something that's anticholinergic, could make things worse, and it could actually harm the patient. Delirium is a state of change of consciousness and attention in the brain that has to be due to some kind of secondary thing. Secondary meaning it's the effect of some other primary cause. So delirium is secondary to infection or trauma or hypoxemia. The point is there is some kind of insult to the brain that's impairing how it functions. Okay, so there's an insult, but your brain can be insulted in a lot of ways. So why is it delirium? Well, delirium is a specific syndrome that relates to the physiology of how awake you are and how much you can sustain your attention. And all those have to do with the medial structures. By medial, I mean towards the middle of your head. If my 80-year-old body is in the hospital and I have an aspiration pneumonia, it's pretty hard to get energy to power all of my organs, including my brain. That's one of my organs. And so when you have hypoactivity or lack of energy into this middle part right here, you get a couple really common things. These two little egg-shaped boys are called the thalami, and they function like the CPU for your entire brain. They synthesize all sorts of sensory information and then fire out the output of it. But they also make you feel aroused in the sense of wakefulness. They wake you up, they don't turn you on sexually. The middle part of our prefrontal cortex plays a huge role in, believe it or not, attention. It finally affects the medial part of the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe mediates visual spatial function, your ability to see things around you, recognizing faces and the like. Okay, Preston, so you just said the medial parts of the brain, including the thalamus, the prefrontal cortex, and the parietal lobe are all affected. And we know by extension we're gonna have problems with staying awake, paying attention, and recognizing your surroundings, which are all aspects of delirium. So now we can track that onto the clinical definition of delirium. So an acute change from baseline, some kind of organic medical cause that's insulting the brain. We have decreased arousal or waxing and waning levels of consciousness, impaired attention, which is going to relate to our medial prefrontal cortex, and we have disorientation, which is some kind of combination of all of the above, and the parietal cortex, which could also affect visual hallucination. So delirium might be affecting the patient's attention. How do we even test for that? There are many different types of attention, so it's not great to use that as a catch-all term here, but essentially what we're looking at is someone's ability to sustain focus on a task for an extended period of time while remembering that they're working on that task. That's what's lost when you have that medial prefrontal lobe dysfunction. So you can ask someone to subtract 7 back from 100 because you have to picture the numbers in your head. 93, 86, 79. Have them spell world backwards, say the months of the year backwards. Delirium can be very subtle, and sometimes people will do really well in every single cognitive domain except for attention. If you suspect someone has delirium, look at their medications first. Our best bud, acetylcholine, is needed for function nearly ubiquitously across neurosynapses, but he's especially important in working memory. One of the easiest ways to prevent delirium is to reduce anticholinergic medications. So when you take a medication like Benadryl that blocks a lot of acetylcholine, you're just chasing your tail and are going to make things way worse for trying to conserve any of your working memory. This can be paradoxical because when someone's experiencing delirium, they might be hyperactive. They're disoriented, they can't pay attention, but their body's still functioning. So people may not know what's happening around themselves. They start acting up, they're pulling out their restraints, and the go-to is, oh, give them some Benadryl to knock them out. But the issue is hypoactivity of the brain. So when you give a medication that suppresses or depresses your brain activity, you're gonna make the situation worse, which is why things like Ativan actually have a paradoxical effect on the patient. Because delirium is always due to a medical cause, the treatment is always treat the underlying cause. But Preston, we looked at all the underlying causes and we didn't find any. The patient's still delirious. Well, I would just say your results speak for themselves. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, my good sir. We had this patient in their 80s, totally delirious. Every lab looked perfect. They had no blemishes, no wounds on them, no idea where they were, and every family member was saying it's an acute decline from baseline. So people became incredulous, naturally, and the only complaint was that every time he sat down, he said, my butt. And I was like, oh, he's just not getting comfortable. He's not sitting right, because he wouldn't complain too much about it. But my chief, who was a med peds resident, said, let's take a gander at the anus. Well, she didn't say it like that. She said, let's do a rectal exam. And it turns out he had a perianal abscess that was about this big, causing exquisite pain. And after we drained it the next morning, his delirium resolved. We came in the room, and he was shaving with a straight razor and was like, "Good morning, gentlemen. Any updates on my care plan today?" The point is, if a patient's delirious, there's gotta be a reason why, and you just haven't found it. And sometimes you'll never find it, and that's okay, but like, please keep looking.